Hello, everyone. Been a while, but welcome back to the Chillaxing and Chit Chatting podcast. Or if you're new here, welcome. I am the host, Time Agent MW, also known as Miguel Whittle, and I just hope you are all doing okay. And thank you to anyone who's responded to my podcast episode on mental health. I'm glad you enjoyed the episode. For this episode, I thought for one thing, I'm going to try and do more episodes, and also for the structure, how the episodes are going to go, they will include me doing face cam. However, I am also going to include gameplay footage as well, so kind of trying to blend the two together. So I think it could still, work. And if not gameplay, they will be images on there. If it's like, say, my Big Finish audio reviews, which I'm gonna put up through this video as well. And as well as obviously it was I did a vid my last episode was on mental health, and now we are here a couple months later, and I still want to say that it's important to check on your mental health, because even though mental health week or month or any sort of awareness is over, it doesn't mean that it's over for you to not check up on your mental health or check out mental health with other people. Um, so I hope it's still important to you people to go ahead and make sure to check on people. Um, One thing I will say as well is that it's been good overall this year for me in terms of my mental health, in terms of opening up to more people about my mental health. It has helped out. Um, but with this episode as well, I'm going to try and be a bit more positive. I'm going to do a bit more of a positive episode. So to start with, firstly, I think I got this bef after the episode, a nice t-shirt, which if I just put down, Fantastic Four t-shirt. Yeah, I bought the t-shirt not about a month or so ago. Yeah, I'm pretty happy to have gotten it, although I bought two by accident. But yeah, I'm someone who's a big fan of the Fantastic Four. Through the comics, I've been reading through some of the comics, ranging from Stanley and Jack Kirby's original comics to also the comics that are written by in the 2000s by Mark Waid and have Mike Wieringo doing the artwork, which is really good actually. It's a really good jumping on point to the series. I think I have actually one of the comics over here. Oh, here we are. Sorry about that. So I have actually do have one of the comics here. It's the first appearance of Black Panther in the comics in the first appearance of Black Panther ever in Marvel Comics, which was in Fantastic Four. And that's issue 52. And before that, they had This Man, This Monster in issue 51. And then from like the previous three issues before that was the Galactus trilogy. So I think you say Stanley and Jack Kirby were on a roll with that era of Marvel, and actually as well with Marvel Comics. I think it'd be good to bring this up that I've recently subscribed to Marvel Unlimited, which I'm using on my laptop. I'm going to be using on my laptop. Mostly because I want to pick up and read some comic books digitally, and the main thing for it is not is for two reasons. One is that there's a lot of comic books out there, and my room and the loft, it can't be endless. So there's not going to be an opportunity. So there's going to be moments where I will not be able to afford being able to have comics in my room or whatever, and there's not enough space. And also for another reason is that some of the comic books I may read will be from problematic people who have said controversial things or perhaps have done things that are criminal. So if that's the case, I will use Marvel Unlimited if I'm wanting to maybe check out this comic book that might be quite interesting or people recommend, but is written by a problematic figure. Because I think with Marvel Unlimited, it's the best way to read them without giving really these people money. The money goes through to Marvel mostly as a subscription service. Because, Marvel Unlimited means you're reading most of Marvel's library, so it's not really going to directly the writers or illustrators or whatever of the problematic people. So it's a benefit really to go through Marvel Unlimited, and I've been wanting to go through it for a while, mostly because I've been wanting to read X-Men, getting into their comic books. Mostly though, there is the issue that there is John Byrne, who is a quite a key figure in the X-Men with the comic books, and he also was a key figure in Fantastic Four. Actually, his run on Fantastic Four is quite well known. But the issue is that he has been a bit problematic. If you go on Wikipedia, there's a whole list of things that he said that I personally would not agree with, mainly surrounding transgender people, and yeah, it's just something I wouldn't personally agree with. And it's a bit weird to get those statements from him, especially considering he wrote a lot for the X-Men, which is about acceptance and equality and diversity. And it just seems a bit weird that that is the case. I mean, one of the characters in X-Men is Mystique, who can change and transform from male to female in terms of character, in terms of changing in disguise, but also that could relate to people who perhaps are, not sure of their identity themselves. I think that can be quite relatable to a lot of people. So it's a bit of a weird kind of thing. Um, and actually linking it to mental health, I think X-Men is quite a good comic book example of mental health because they're a group of people that mentally do struggle perhaps with being persecuted or going through bigotry. And I think also that means, I think personally, that it's why I think it's really good that Jake Schreier, I believe his name is directing the film because he's the director behind Thunderbolts, which came out this year, which I enjoyed. And he is going to be directing the MCU's X-Men film. And it's been said that he's a big fan of the comics. And not only that, but I think with him involved, not just him as a fan, I think he can also um, do something that is a bit similar to what he did with Thunderbolts, where Thunderbolts, one of the biggest strengths for me in that film was the use of mental health, how it was depicted in a way that was quite realistic and quite well handled for essentially a blockbuster film. How it tackles the depression and other mental health aspects that are shown in Thunderbolts. And I think it works quite well for the X-Men because they are people who are mentally perhaps struggling with their powers and struggling with who they are and their identity. And also the Void aspect, the creative direction going through the Void with Bob and having kind of the mental um going through the mind of Bob and also the other character and team members, I think could also work with the X-Men when it comes to, Professor X or other telekinetic characters exploring the minds of various characters, which could be quite good. And my sort of idea of the X-Men as well is that specifically with, say, Cyclops, for instance, who's the leader of the X-Men usually, is that I think we could have a the Batman kind of situation where he's been Cyclops for a couple of years, only about 2 years or something, and he's still struggling to perhaps be kind of a leader, and he goes under this arc where he learns by the end of the film to be a really good leader for the X-Men, which I think would be quite nice. And then you have other characters as well that could be included. I mean, there's various different other X-Men members to include, of course, that people were wanting to have in the X-Men for the MCU. And although we have the X-Men from the Fox films coming into Avengers, Doomsday, and Secret Wars, my prediction is that they will have their last appearance, their last stand in those two films, and then they're going to move on with new actors playing the roles because I think it'd be best to do that. And even though those Fox X-Men films, there are some good films in those X-Men films, there's also some not so great ones. And I think knowing I haven't really read the comics, but I've heard from fans, and this is probably true that, they only explored a little fraction of the X-Men in terms of being accurate to the comics, which they weren't really some of the time. I mean, they even kind of felt like they didn't want to be an X-Men film. There's the line from X-Men 1 where Cyclops says to Wolverine, what would you prefer, yellow spandex? And it's like, yeah, I think most people would. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see when that comes into the MCU as well. But at the moment with myself, I've been seeing, of course, superhero content. I checked out Loki actually, and I've been catching up with some of the other MCU content. But one thing I've also been doing this month specifically, or rather started in September, was getting into more horror franchises. I thought of doing something called Sinister September, which is basically me taking a look at horror franchises. Due to personal reasons, I kind of like took a bit of a break here and there. But I've been going through some horror films, specifically mainly I went through the Chucky franchise, at least the main movies from Child's Play 1 to Cult of Chucky. I've not seen the TV series, but I hear it's good and it should be quite good to watch. And I haven't seen the reboot, but for me, I'm going to be but for me as well, I also watched at the start of September, on the very first day of September, I watched Weapons, which was the horror film that got a lot of people talking about because of the marketing and how it was kind of mysterious. And overall, I found it to be quite a good horror film. I really enjoyed it, mainly to do with the different character point of view and that mystery thriller aspect, which I think is probably true. I think it got hyped up quite a bit in terms of being really, really scary. It's got some creepy little moments in the film, but I don't know if I would go as far as to say it's really, really scary. It's actually more of a thriller that also has some funny moments involved in it, intentionally funny moments as well. I think it's quite good, especially towards one bit at the end, which I think if you've seen the film, you know what I'm talking about. But it is quite a creative horror film. And then after going through the Chucky films, which by the way I have enjoyed, I've done a whole I've reviewed all of them on Letterboxd. I did a list of ranking them. All of them are good, and some of the best ones are really, really good. I really enjoyed the first Child's Play is my favorite, and also I enjoyed a lot of the time the comedic ones of Bride and Seed of Chucky. I know Seed of Chucky isn't liked a lot by some people, but I liked Seed of Chucky. But the next horror franchise I went into was Evil Dead. I may check out the remake and Evil Dead Rise, but I went to just watch the trilogy, and I also do have the TV series Ash versus Evil Dead, which I will watch at some point. But Evil Dead trilogy I watched, and I had a really good time with that. That was a really, really good franchise where every installment I really enjoyed. The first film I think is probably the weakest for me. Still good, but I found it to be the weakest. Second film is probably my favorite. I love the second film. The second film is such a fun romp, and the third film's also really fun. But I think the second film wings it out for me, and I explained why in my Army of Darkness review. But Army of Darkness was also a lot of fun, and I can see why a lot of people really liked it. At the moment, I'm going through another horror franchise. There was two to choose from. One that I'm going to watch out later is the Scream franchise. I have here the six movies on Blu-ray, um, which I know a lot of my friends were saying is really, really good. You should watch Scream. So I will be watching that franchise. But there's another franchise to watch, and I decided to pick one of the big three slasher franchises, which were Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, and Friday the 13th. Now, I excluded Nightmare on Elm Street only because with me going through this year on Scream, I felt like that's already the first film, anyways, at least, was directed by Wes Craven. So I felt like that's already one Wes Craven franchise to dive into. So I felt like probably best not to do that. Instead, I go ahead and go through a different franchise, a different of the other two big three, and I wasn't too sure what to decide, Halloween or Friday the 13th. So I did a little spin the wheel, and in the end, Friday the 13th was the winner. And I'm just going to go through the eight films that are titled Friday the 13th in this set. At some point, another time, I will perhaps go ahead and take a look at the other installments, but because of getting to the end of October and everything, I will go and stick with just watching these. I'm probably going to watch two or three today, and then the next day go on to the other two, and then I'll have time to go through the six Scream films. That's what I'm hoping for, anyways, but you never know. But that is what I'm doing at the moment. I thought I'd get into more horror, so I am watching a bit more horror films at the moment. And then I'll be back onto the other things I'm watching, like for instance, watching films by Wes Anderson, which I'm going through. I've got about six or five to go through left. And then there's also the Pixar films that I've been reviewing, which I will get back onto as well. It's just a lot of different other things to go through. And I am also going through season 8 of classic Doctor Who. So I'm going through the Pertwee era, which I'm really enjoying mostly. I really find that to be quite a comforting era. And actually, there was a bit of news recently about on Big Finish that it is 10 years since um, the Third Doctor's era is since the Third Doctor Adventures was released by Big Finish back in 2015. They released the Third Doctor Adventures, which was a range that has been quite consistently successful, and as of recent years has been getting a lot of praise. It's had an interesting evolution where Tim Treloar was doing the role of the Third Doctor. I heard Volume 1 was kind of less of a full cast and more of a audiobook kind of situation where you have a narrator mostly coming in like Tim Treloar, and then some voices come in here and there for the dialogue, not doing kind of the typical full cast audio drama. But then that changed, I think, with volume two. I think it was up till volume six or seven, where volume six, I think, has well, I think volumes, the first kind of six volumes were with the Third Doctor and Joe Grant, mostly because Katie Manning is sadly the only surviving actor in terms of companions that are still here. We also had other actors coming in, like Richard Franklin as Sergeant Benton, or there's also the actor playing Mike Yates as well coming in into the cast as well, which is really nice. So those two were still around. If I go into the cast list here on my Big Finish app, I should be able to actually look into this. Da, 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 okay, so if I went to go into this cast list, let's see what we have. Okay, so it doesn't say on this one, but yes, the actors playing Captain Yates and also Sergeant Benton, those two characters will be played still by the same actors. Um, and these two, so actually, I want to pay respect actually. What are these actors' names? But if I go to this volume four sort of thing, uh, because Richard Franklin, I believe, is Richard Franklin is I believe Richard Franklin was played by Richard Franklin played Sergeant Benton, and that it was no, it was Richard Franklin who played Mike Yates. So Mike Yates played Richard Franklin. Benton was not played by him. He was played by John Levine. John Levine, that was his name. John Levine, who plays Sergeant Benton, and Richard Franklin, who's sadly no longer with us, who played Mike Yates in some of these Third Doctor adventures, would also come into the fold. And then as these box sets would go along, they would always consist of two four-parters, I believe. They have two four-parters on each set. Um, and originally it was just Adventures with the Third Doctor and Joe. Katie Manning's still alive. Um, and as well as that, Joe Grant is the most recognizable and the most recognizable and the mo longest running companion for the Third Doctor, so it made sense. And then when we get to Volume 5, which I bought recently from the sale, which celebrates 10 years of the Third Doctor Adventures, there was a little sale on Big Finish's website where you could purchase these at a cheaper price. There was Volume 5 where they changed a bit of the structure where they now include some of the characters played by people who do impressions of the characters. So you have the Brigadier played by John Coleshaw, who's a really good impressionist for like the Fourth Doctor and various other does loads of great impressions. He's known for doing Dead Ringers, and he also does a really good impression of the Brigadier, played by the originally by the late great Nicholas Courtney. And in the volume five, there's the first story called Primord, which was written by John Dorney and is supposed to be really good. And Primords are the monsters that were the villains, the main monsters in Inferno, which was the closing story in season seven in Inferno. They were the monsters in Inferno, the story that concluded season seven, John Pertwee's first season as the Third Doctor, which is really good. And that story, of course, features Liz Shaw. It's her final story on screen, who was played originally by Caroline John. And actually, I've been listening to the Companion Chronicles, which is a range where companions narrate stories from earlier eras of the show, mostly. And for the Third Doctor's era, they did some with Caroline John, who played, of course, Liz Shaw. Sadly, Caroline passed away in 2012. But in 2018 or 2019, I believe, 2019 it might have been, 2019, yeah. In 2019, Caroline John's daughter, Daisy Ashford, would take on the role of Liz Shaw in Primords originally. And then when we get to volume seven, I believe, they actually did they started doing they did actually a box set that is completely mostly comprised of people doing impressions of actors from the Third Doctor's era. So you have so you have Liz Shaw once again in a season seven story set during season seven actually. So not during because in Primords that story by John Dorney that was with Joe Grant as well. So that's when Liz has left unit. Whereas with this one, the Undial Incursion, it has Liz Shaw played by Liz Shaw still working for unit set during season seven, so before Inferno. And it has Daisy Ashford playing the role of Liz Shaw once again. And then the next one in the box set of Volume 7, The Gulf, which is written by Tim Foley, you have a story set during season 11, John Pertwee's final season as the Third Doctor, which had him meeting Sarah Jane Smith. It was her first season as the companion, and the iconic character was, of course, played by the sadly missed, much missed Elizabeth Sladen, who's sadly no longer with us as well. Um, and what you have in that box set is you have Liz is a Elizabeth Sladen's daughter, uh, known as C.D. Miller, is playing the role of Sarah Jane Smith, and she still continues to play the role of Sarah Jane Smith, which is really, really nice that the legacy of the character is still being carried over in a way that's quite respectful. I know recently there was a DVD or a release that came out where which involves Nicholas Briggs interviewing and talking to both Daisy and Sadie and talking about, their experience of what it's like to play the roles that their mothers played that were, of course, iconic characters in Doctor Who, which is really, really nice. From what I understand, it should be a really, really great documentary to take a look into. And and then I think in volume 8 it might have been, um, or volume 9, they eventually started to change the box set to include mostly one story where they've gotten the third Doctor traveling, where you got like a big seven-parter in season 7, or you have a story that's like a six-parter with Sarah Jane Smith and the third Doctor. And then in as well as that, there's also a range where Jo Grant is now older, known as Jo Jones, and she travels with the third Doctor as well. So there's a lot of different areas within that range. And it's I haven't listened to a lot of the Third Doctor adventures, but a lot of people have praised it quite a bit. I fairly enjoyed the one that I have listened to, the Brain Drain, but hopefully there should be other installments that should be really, really good to listen to. So I'm looking forward to diving into more of this era. Originally, I was going to listen to more of the Jo Grant ones after I've gone through all of her seasons, but I think I can probably enjoy it even when just listening after just, watching at least one of her seasons, season 8. I can probably just dive into one of her audio sets. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Very much looking forward to it. I should say as well, I have here one of the Fanta cans. I haven't had the Chucky one yet, but I've got the Fruit Twist one, which has the grabber from the Black Phone. I have not seen the Black Phone or the Black Phone 2, but I know it's supposed to be pretty good. So I should look forward to taking a look at that film at some point. But yes, I know Fanta has been releasing some of these cans for Halloween, and they had one for Chucky, which is like I might want to take a look and see if I can find the Chucky Fanta cans at some point before eventually those cans go away, and of course Christmas suddenly takes over. Although that does annoy me when Christmas is already taking over in the shops. You see it anyways now that there's even when it's Halloween time, just in the corner or somewhere, you get Christmas stuff coming in and blending in. It's like Christmas, you have your time later on. Wait for Halloween. But I think it's just because we in the UK don't care as much about Halloween as we do about Christmas. And some people do take quickly to start setting up Christmas. I remember when when I had finished secondary school, finished a day at secondary school, I'd walk to Tesco nearby, and then as I walked past, there were houses that had Christmas trees, and this is in September, and it was like, wait a second, wait for Halloween for God's sake. It's not even Halloween, it's not bonfire night. Just wait a dang minute for a second. Why are you setting up your Christmas tree? You don't expect Santa to suddenly come up in the middle of October or November or whatever. We know he comes in at the very end of December. You got about 3 months to wait for it. Just hold your horses. So it does irritate me quite a bit. It's like I want to celebrate Halloween first, but not to celebrate it, unfortunately. So, oh well. But with Big Finish in mind, actually, I think it'd be a good time to start talking about what is a range that I've enjoyed and I need to get back to listening to. I'll listen to it much more frequently, quicker than I have done at the moment. And I listened to the set a while back, a couple of months ago, but I feel like I can still talk about it, still fresh in my mind. Can't exactly remember when I listened to it, but it was a couple of months ago. But basically, you may remember on my podcast one time, I took a look at this, which was Geronimo, which was the start of a new range of audios back in 2020, 2022 it started, and basically to summarize, that Geronimo is the third volume in the 11th Doctor Chronicles range. However, it is the start of a new series for the 11th Doctor. So you can listen to this one first, Geronimo, and it is a really darn great box set where the 11th Doctor in After the Snowman, but before the events of the Bells of St. John, is looking for Clara Oswald. He knows that he's met her twice, first in the Dalek Asylum and then the second time in Victorian London. And both of those two had died and had said the same thing. Run, you clever boy. Remember, he realizes that this is the same woman and he needs to find this woman. And as he's going along trying to find her, he suddenly bumps into this new person, Valerie Lockwood, who, if I could put it up, there you are, a part cybernetic person, um, played by Safia Ingar, and she tags along with the 11th Doctor and decides to go traveling with the 11th Doctor. And the first box set, Geronimo, was a really good box set in terms of having a great range of stories with The Inheritance, The House of Masks, which was probably my favorite, and The End. Those stories were really darn great. And those, the thing is, was what was great about each of those three stories is they each had something that was really terrific, a standout scene or some that was really emotional. And it showcased it that the producer of this set, who's kind of like the showrunner of this set, Alfie Shaw, who also wrote the Inheritance, showcases that him and everyone else is really committing to making a really good range. That's not just let's get the 11th Doctor with like a new companion. And the 11th Doctor here is not played by Matt Smith, but he's played by a really good impressionist, Jacob Dudman. But let's go ahead and perhaps explore aspects of the 11th Doctor that weren't explored much on television, like him talking about the Time War, and also having just a really powerful moments in this box set that showcase that this is really committing to being a really good box set. And I don't think many people expected that there'd be so much heart and emotion and that there would be a lot of care that goes into it. And as well as that, the stories are really creative. There's a great range of stories in this. You get the inheritance being, while set in kind of the future, your kind of typical present day kind of story of a companion meeting the Doctor. Second story is a story set in the past. The end is set in a sort of based on the siege far future thing that has a really creative narrative. And because of this, I was very much wanting to dive into eventually the next box set, which is this one, All of Time and Space. I have this box set here. I'm putting up photos of it as you can see on the screen. Um, but All of Time and Space is the second box set in this range. And I want to also talk about another thing with the 11th Doctor Chronicles after this box set, but I'll take a look into that later. But that, for now, let's take a look at All of Time and Space. So All of Time and Space is not written by Alfie Shaw. He doesn't write any of these stories, but the template was he started with was in Geronimo, and All of Time and Space features three different writers from the different box set writing for this box set. And whilst I don't think this was as good as Geronimo, it's still darn great. And I would say that the best story in this range so far is in this box set, which, funny enough, is the first one in this box set that happens to also be the name of the box set, All of Time and Space, which is the name of not only the box set, it's the name of the very first story in this box set. And I will say that, as I said just now, it is the best story in this range. So whilst this box set is not as strong as Geronimo, it does have the best story in this range. And All of Time and Space, the very first story in this box set, is said to be written by Ellery Quest. Now, here's the thing that is kind of a little twist, but it's not too much of a spoiler or anything. Ellery Quest is not a real person. You're probably wondering, who is Ellery Quest? I've never heard of this person who's written for Doctor Who before. Well, that's because Ellery Quest is not necessarily a real person, but is the main character in this story. Because whilst this does feature the Doctor and Valerie, Ellery Quest is actually the main person in this box set, and he's the guy that is on the middle there. Um, he is played by, I'm trying to see if I can go through. I'm actually going to just go through the box set in terms of the cast list. Let's see. Okay, so looking at the cast list, Ellery Quest is played by Leroy Bonsu. So Leroy Bonsu plays Ellery Quest, who is this person who pitches the TV show of Doctor Who. So basically, he pitches the TV show. He pitches it with like, having the Doctor and Valerie, and he even starts at one point in the and what's really funny as well is that he actually does the theme tune, and that becomes the intro for this story. So instead of playing the usual Doctor Who theme tune, we have this guy, Ellery Quest, playing the Doctor Who theme tune by going da 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 and doing all the music for that intro, which is really, really funny. And you might think, okay, is this just going to be a case of a meta kind of narrative? Well, not exactly. It's not just that. No, all of Time and Space's actual story premise is this. As concepts for shows go, it's a good one. An adventurer and his friend traveling through all of time and space, righting wrongs and defending those who can't defend themselves. Yet, as its creator is about to discover, there are those who'd rather this show never existed. What's so dangerous about Doctor Who? And I think that's all I'll say in terms of the plot. But actually, what I will say as well is that when the Doctor and Valerie do come into the story, it is really funny. But what's great about this story is that it's not just a fun little meta narrative. It doesn't just have the idea that, oh, there's this person who's creating the show of Doctor Who. No, what's great about this story is that you have a really interesting character journey for the character of Ellery. And the actual writer behind this story is Tim Foley. And what's great about his script here is that Allery is such a well-rounded, fleshed out character that he is there's such a great he's so well fleshed out that you know just so well about the character, and he has such a great personality. He has a great interesting character journey. He's so well-rounded that he's easily the standout supporting player in this box set, and it's because of the script and also because of the performance given by Leroy, that makes Ellery such a wonderful character. And it's the main reason why this is my favorite story so far in the 11 and Valerie box sets, because you have this character who's so fleshed out, as I mentioned, and because of that, you get such a great core of his character, and his journey is really terrific because once you get the sort of fun meta narrative that he's writing and pitching Doctor Who, the story then progresses into becoming this quite moving story and journey for Ellery. And you also have 11 and Valerie's dynamic being once again terrific because you have them not necessarily agreeing together on everything. And so you also get then kind of this disagreement with each other about how to help Ellery, what to do exactly. And because of that, it results in just this really terrific story. And I think for me personally, I had such a blast and such a great time listening to this that I would 100% be happy listening to this. I mean, I'd be happy listening to this whole range, obviously, but this one in particular was a real standout for me. I found this to be such a wonderful, brilliant story. I really, really liked this one. This one was a real standout for me. And it's because of this why I would recommend this box set. The other two stories are still good, but just even for like All of Time and Space, the story All of Time and Space, not the box set, that alone is worth the price in my opinion. It's an incredibly good Big Finish audio, probably one of the standouts I've listened to this year, and I still remember it so well in terms of just the character of Ellery and the journey he goes through. That is actually quite emotional for his character. That makes it really, really terrific to listen to. The second box set, the second story in this box set, The Yearn, written by Angus Dunican, has the premise of the people of Medroof are under siege. Forced into underground bunkers, the Medroofians are desperate for a way to escape. When the Doctor and Valerie arrive, it seems like they finally got everything they've wanted, except that's when the nightmares really begin. And for me, this was the weakest one in the box set, but this one was still pretty good. I think the main thing that I really, really liked, and probably the standout bit in it, was this potential romance Valerie has with this other character who is part of the crew, and they develop this really wonderful bond relationship together. So I can't remember, so I'm trying to see if I can remember the name of the character. I think her name was Rorana. That was her name. And there was a really nice bond between the two of them that is probably the standout bit in the story. The main thing as to probably why this is the weakest one is not necessarily it's bad, but more so because with the other stories, like All of Time and Space or all the stories in Geronimo, there was something really creative about the premise. There was something unique about what they did. What the Yearn does is a well solid base under siege story, essentially. You have a crew that is being hunted down by this creature, this mysterious force called the Yearn, and the Doctor and Valerie have a really good bantering about, especially towards the start. Um, so it still provides great entertainment value, and as I mentioned, there's a really good romance between Roanna and Valerie that makes it somewhat really great to listen to, and so that is really nice to listen. That's really nice to listen to. And once again, Dudman and Ingar not only do they have a great dynamic together, but their performance throughout this box set and throughout the previous box set, Geronimo, continues to be great. It's just as I said, it does play into the typical base under siege story, and I think that's probably why it sticks out necessarily in the ironic way, where it sticks out because it doesn't have anything to really stand out to make it unique. It mostly has the typical kind of aspect to the base under siege premise. And the thing is, Geronimo kind of had a base under siege story as well with the end, which was the final story in that box set, where that story had a very unique kind of take on the premise of the base under siege kind of aspect, because the base under siege was there as well, but there was a very unique premise involving kind of like time travel and the sort of different narratives back and forth. Not to give much away, but the premise and the way it changed around the narrative structure was very unique. And so thankfully that did manage to make this that particular story stand out and not just be the typical base under siege story, whereas this mostly does the typical base under siege premise. Not in a bad way, but just in a way that does feel kind of like we've been there, done that. It's not the worst, but it could be done better. But now we take a look at the final story in this box set, which was Curiosity Shop by James Goss. So the premise now, James Goss, of course, is a very well-known writer for Doctor Who. So there was a bit of interest for me, anyways, to take a look into this story, and I imagine a lot of people were. But the premise is this: Mr. Foreman owns a junkyard. He doesn't get many visitors. In fact, all anyone ever seems interested in is Barbara. One woman informs Mr. Foreman she knows the truth about Barbara, that she went on impossible ventures with a man called the Doctor. This woman, this Valerie, will do anything to be reunited with Barbara and the Doctor, even if it kills her. So that premise is very, very interesting, as I'm sure you know. Now, for those who don't know, Foreman is the name that the Doctor's granddaughter, the very first companion Doctor ever had, Susan took because the TARDIS originally was in a junkyard that had the name I am Foreman. And the name Susan, or no, actually, the name Barbara, I believe is what it said on the premise. Yes, Barbara is the name that Mr. Foreman gives the TARDIS. Now, Mr. Foreman is played by Jacob Dudman, and the character Valerie tries to talk to the character of Mr. Foreman. So I won't give too much away because with this one in particular, it is very much a case of wanting to go in blind and then be hit with the emotional aspect to it. This wasn't my favorite of the box set, but I can understand why some people may have this as their favorite because this was a really powerful, quite devastating sort of piece. I can imagine it. And this may be the best performance I've listened to in this box set of Sophia Ingar. She's really good in the story, as is Dudman, but for a different reason. What this does to the character of Valerie is very emotional and devastating. I think the best comparison to have with like a Doctor Who episode with this one would probably be World Enough and Time, where it comes to the character of Bill. And I won't say too much, but you know, if you've seen that episode, you know what I'm talking about, how it is quite a devastating episode for Bill, and in terms of just like the weight that she has, and it's also kind of similar to Human Nature and the Family of Blood. And so it doesn't provide the most fun experience, perhaps, especially towards how it ends. But when as the narrative goes along, it's not trying to be a fun episode. What it is trying to do, this story, Curiosity Shop, is provide a real character piece for the character Valerie and give her something that really tests her and also tests kind of her loyalty to the Doctor. Now, here's the interesting thing about this particular story. this story would now originally there was going to be the next box set, which was Everywhere and Anywhere. That was going to be how the 11th Doctor Chronicles were going to go from this box set, All of Time and Space, to then the next box set. However, after doing all the box sets, Dudman and Sophia Ingar, especially, I think, were wanting to perhaps get some sort of closure to what happens at the end of Curiosity Shop, thinking that it'd be a bit weird that after Curiosity Shop, Eleven and Valerie are just traveling about, enjoying time and space, um, without, discussing what happened previously. So in November, a download-only release came out called Broken Hearts, written by Lisa McMullen. I will talk about that just a sec, but just to conclude my thoughts on All in Time and Space, as I said, this wasn't as good as Geronimo, but I still recommend it. If you really liked Geronimo, I'm guaranteed that you will at least have some enjoyment out of this box set. There's a nice supporting cast in this box set, and on top of that, All of Time and Space, the opening story to this box set, written by Tim Foley, which is about Valerie Quest, is definitely my favorite of the 11th Doctor and Valerie adventures so far. I think that for me, that was a really darn good story and probably one of the best I've listened to this year from Big Finish and one that I'd be happy to listen to again. It was a really terrific story. Personally for me, that was absolutely the standout of this box set and the standout of these adventures so far. And I think that alone justifies you picking up this particular box set. But the other two stories are also dang good. One is perhaps a bit typical based on the siege, but still well done, with one good little romance subplot coming in. And the third one, whilst not my favorite, is still a good character piece. And as I mentioned, Sophia Ingar is really darn good in this. I mean, throughout these box sets, they've proven to be a terrific actor. And I know one of a film they starred in, Brides, came out recently, which I haven't watched yet, but I will want to watch at some point. But what was great about Sophia is that as Valerie, is that they provide a great sort of argumentative, more contrasting side. They don't just banter away with the 11th Doctor. They do argue against him, and she is as character. Valerie is a terrific new companion that adds such a unique dynamic with 11, and she's great. And Sophia delivers terrific performance throughout. And in Curiosity Shop, the reason why it feels so moving is because of how devastated and how much Sophia puts into the performance. You really buy just how devastating and how draining it is for her as a character as the story progresses. I won't give away too much, but James Goss did do a dang good job, I would say that. So as I mentioned, the next box set is Everywhere and Anywhere. And what's exciting about the next two box sets that are the second half, in a way, of the 11th and Valerie range is that the first two set these characters up. They have new monsters and enemies to face, which they do kind of have in the next two box sets. But because they've established the characters, what's great is they do the right thing in terms of like, let's now bring in, after establishing these characters, the returning villains and monsters. And you'll notice on Everywhere and Anywhere, the Cybermen are on the cover, which I'm looking forward to. And Victory of the Doctor features the Daleks, specifically the Paradigm Daleks. When I get onto that box set, I will talk about it as much as I can without spoiling it. But originally, it was going to be that the release was going to be All of Time and Space and then go on to Everywhere and Anywhere. However, there was a bit of uh, I think Dudman and Sophia Ingar talked about this in the interview, that they felt like that there was a need to perhaps, have a little episode that expands on kind of how the Doctor and Valerie feel post Curiosity Shop, but before the third box set, because it felt a bit weird that perhaps they are, the 11 and Valerie are traveling about together, nothing's changed too much to them. It felt perhaps not right. And so that's why in November of 2023, just a month before the third box set came out, there was Broken Hearts, which was written by Lisa McMullen, who stated was a fan of this range and wanted to write for this range and got the opportunity thanks to this release. And as I said, it's only downloadable, so you can't get it in a box set. And the thing is, because it's download only and it's not part of a box set, you might think, is it really necessary? To which my answer would be yes, absolutely. This is a really darn good story that is really like Curiosity Shop, a really moving emotional piece. And the thing is, With the other box sets, there's of course a full cast. This just has Dudman and Sophia Ingar. Jacob Dudman and Sophia Ingar are working together, and it is terrific. The premise behind this is that he took her apart and she told him she was fine. She lied. He saved their world and told them they'd be safe. He was wrong. Now, that's all I'll say. But here's the thing. I'll put up the cover as down there. And you'll notice, of course, that there is the Eighth Doctor in the corner. Now, here's the thing. I'll explain the premise behind this. To summarize, the 11th Doctor and Valerie travel after Curiosity Shop to a particular planet. This planet is a planet that also happens to get impacted and have its weather kind of change due to the emotions of who is on that planet. So if a person gets sad or if a person gets sad, it's going to be probably raining, and if someone's really angry, thunder and storms start coming through. Now, you're probably wondering why there's a statue of the Eighth Doctor. Well, the thing is, this is a planet that the 11th Doctor, the Doctor, sorry, has been to before, but in his eighth incarnation. And the thing is, he hasn't told Valerie about regeneration yet. So, with the events of Curiosity Shop, Valerie's already not in a good spot in terms of her relationship with the Doctor. So when she sees that, she then starts getting a bit more angry and questioning more about to the Doctor. And as the story progresses along, the Doctor and Valerie both get really emotional in the story. And I said both because the Doctor, Dudman, is allowed to not just do the typical flexures of 11th Doctor. And that's what's great about this range is that Dudman's not just doing a typical impression, he's actually able to do emotional moments, as I said. So he's able to give more than just a typical, oh, that's a pretty good impression of the 11th Doctor. He's able to give more with it in terms of the emotional range, which is also a good thing about the 12th Doctor audios that I reviewed, which had the 12th Doctor paired up with the Time Agent character. Trying to remember the name now. But it was in Time Jacked and You Only Die Twice, which was really done, which were good as well. And they were able to give the 12th Doctor, not just a good impression from Dudman. It was the 12th Doctor went through an interesting character journey with the companion that he was paired up with. And with this as well, it's the same kind of thing. And there's a moment that is really terrific in terms of just the Doctor letting it all out. And it coming from the 11th Doctor is really, really great to see. And also having Inga once again doing terrific work as Valerie just proves consistently that she is one of the key reasons why this range works so well. They're just a terrifically talented actor. And as I mentioned, it is a character piece between the two of them. So you're probably wondering about these like robots on the cover. Well, these robots do talk, and they are both voiced by Dudman and Ingar as well. And these robots also go on an interesting kind of journey. You have one voiced by Dudman, who's called Augustus. The other one is called Lionel, voiced by Ingar. And it's great to see their kind of little journey they go through on this in this audio. And because of that, it leads to and they also go on a really nice journey. And as I said, I would say this is essential to listen to because it helps to go ahead and provide some closure towards how the Doctor and Valerie felt by the end of Curiosity Shop. And whilst I still think All of Time and Space is my favorite, this was still a really good story to listen to. And I think that I'd be happy to listen to it again as well because it'd be great to just go back and listen to just how terrific their performances are. It's probably some of the best performances that I've listened to this year, and it's just some terrific work between the two of them. And the end of this box set does kind of give an interesting line from the Doctor, and in a way, broken hearts because it provides some closure to Curiosity Shop. It results in it kind of being able to close the book on the first half of this range with the 11th Doctor and Valerie. And as I said, I'm going to try and listen to much more quickly and frequently the next box sets, which I am very, very looking forward to. As I mentioned, I'm not someone who likes when Christmas kind of overtakes Halloween. However, it is quite nice that I am listening to the next box set everywhere and anywhere during near Christmas time, December time, that might get me in the Christmas spirit because the first story in this box set, in the third box set, is I think called Spirit of the Season, if I'm right. Yeah, Spirit of the Season, written by Georgia Cook, which is a Christmas episode. So that's going to be quite fun to listen to it as a Christmas kind of episode. And I'm also interested to seeing kind of how they tackle the Cybermen. I've heard a little bit about what it's about, but I'm still looking forward to just learning about it and especially getting the sort of like to see kind of how the 11th Doctor range does kind of like sorry, I've had to sort out my okay, there we go. Sorry about that. My battery was running a bit low, I think, on my laptop. Um, okay, it's gonna go through. There we are. Okay, yeah. Sorry, I was having to sort this out. Okay, come on. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. But yeah, I'm looking forward to listening to the third box set, Everywhere and Anywhere. Seeing kind of where the box set goes from here. Um, okay, it's just going a bit funny on my laptop. Okay, are we done? Good. Okay, so as I said, yeah, I'm looking forward to that box set and just seeing kind of, I'm looking forward to a good Christmas episode from the 11th Doctor range, in this audio range, and to also take a look at the Cybermen story. I know there's a story in between those two, so I'll be interested to see kind of what the second story will be like. And of course, there's the next one, Victory of the Doctor, which I've heard nothing but the highest things about. So yeah, that will be very, very exciting. But also, I think this one should be great as well, Everywhere and Anywhere, especially with what it tells with the Cybermen, and also it's got a good Christmas episode. Um, so I think that's everything I want to say about this episode, and I don't want to leave it too long, but all I'll say is for now, thank you very much for listening and watching. Um, and I hope you I hope you enjoyed this episode. There's going to be at the end a playlist of all the other episodes or segments of this podcast, and there's also going to be the previous episode that you can take a listen to about mental health. And as I said, mental health is key, and you shouldn't just, think about it on specific days like Mental Health Awareness Week or month. Think about it throughout. And I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hopefully will record a new episode soon, and you'll hear from me soon about what I think about the rest of the 11th Doctor and Valerie audios. I'm looking forward to diving into them more quickly. And so, yeah, thank you very much for listening and watching. And always remember to keep chillaxing and keep chit-chatting. Thank you.